Hi, I'm Dan Rosenstark with MIDI Designer, and this video is a developer journal, so it's going to be a bit less focused and a bit just whatever I decide to go through. Thanks for all the comments on the last developer journal. Pretty positive stuff. People are apparently excited to hear how this stuff goes behind the scenes, which is interesting, so I'll push ahead. In this video I'm going to talk a little bit about my own rig. As a lot of you know, MIDI Designer was initially conceived to control my own drumming rig and specifically to control effects. And I have actually gone completely backwards away from actually using MIDI Designer much. I'm using Machine Studio. You can see my Machine Studio over there. And I've stopped using effects entirely, or at least manipulating effects in live performance because I want to focus on orchestration, or playing drums really, and then looping that stuff and moving it around and mixing it as I go forward. So I had removed MIDI Designer from my rig for a while, for a month or so, and now I've brought it back because I want to control the QMixes with MIDI Designer. As a lot of you who are Machine fans know, or Machine fans know, the QMix functionality in Machine is terrible. And what I really wanted was something different anyway, which is I want my QMix to audition sounds and kits to go to a separate mix along with a click. And then the click so you have audience mix, click, and the audition stuff, which goes to me. You have audience mix plus click that goes to the other players, particularly my wife, who stands there. And then you have the audience mix, which goes straight out to the audience, right? Which doesn't have the click and doesn't have the auditioning stuff. So this is a picture of my Machine Studio, the buttons, and those are the 8 groups. So I wanted to kind of mimic that in MIDI Designer and create some QMixes, and these are controlling QMixes in Ableton Live. And if you don't locate your Machine instance inside Ableton Live, or inside a DAW, you don't have a lot of this flexibility. And there are very few advantages from what I can tell from running Machine standalone, and lots of advantages for running it inside a DAW. So anyway, so this is the MIDI Designer setup, and these are just 8 QMixes. So they're basically on-off knobs, and that's all they are. Very simple. You don't need MIDI Designer to do this. You could use any MIDI controller. And then I've got a volume knob for the QMix, and then I've got a pan knob for the QMix, and that is to get a reality check of, is this actually the QMix? Am I listening to the QMix? So I shift it around. You can see I shift it around left, shift it around right. This is a knob that just has 3 ticks on it, and 3 ticks, obviously, one of them hits in the center, and the other one hits on the left, and the other hits on the right. And by adjusting the min-max of that range, I can choose how far over to the left or how far over to the right the QMix is going. So going back to Ableton Live, you can see what I'm doing. So this is Ableton, and I actually have, for every single kit, I've got a loopback track, and the loopback track goes back to Machine. And then I've got a Q track. So basically, when I press the A button, you can see here, pressing the A button, and the Q send is going on, so to speak, or the Q track is going on. And when I shut it off, the loopback track is going on. So it'll come back into Machine and be controlled by the master volume in Machine, which is what I want. And you'll see it on the mixers in Machine anyway, even if it's going through the Q. So you can mute it, and then it won't go through the Q, or you can unmute it. So it gives you kind of a way to have MIDI Designer controlling something totally different, which is the QMixes, and have Machine focused on Machine. So that's kind of nice. And the other thing that was cool, and I've never messed around with LED colors myself, because I was like, well, you know, you can see the stuff, but it really does help to get a sense of orientation here. You can see, you know, machine has orange, yellow, this green, this blue, this darker blue, this purple, this pinkish, whatever you call it, and this red thing. And to be able to mimic those inside the QMixes, or inside MIDI Designer, really gives you a strong sense of orientation. And, you know, colors help you orient, and that's kind of, you know, a basic thing that people understand in user interface design and in rig design. So that, you know, this is just about my rig for just a second. Of course, you know, thinking about this before I started taping, I realized I've got 2 tracks for every group in Machine A. So I've got a loop back and a Q, and a loop back and a Q, and a loop back and a Q, etc. And so I've got 16 tracks there, which is that's exactly what return tracks are for, sends and return tracks. So I'll have to refactor that 5 minutes after this taping so that I'm actually just using 2 return tracks. So one will be looping back to machine into a kit in machine, and the second one will be going to the queue. So basically, when you press the button in MIDI Designer, it will turn on the first send or the second send. So, and you know, you can configure those in the MIDI mapping stuff in Ableton. You can actually see that here. If I go into Ableton, you can see all these things where you've got 2 buttons. This is you know, the loop back and the Q, loop back Q, and these are going 127, 64, 64, 127. So that causes this effect, right? Where, let's just go with the B one, where I turn it on, the second one turns on, I turn it off, the first one turns on, and I'll do the exact same thing with sends and consolidate a lot more. So, you know, a lot of people are into, hey man, I want to start up my my MIDI controller and I wanted to know everything about my rig. You know, that's awesome, and there are apps that do that amazingly well. There's Touchable, there's Live Control, there's the other one. There are 5 at least that can map up directly at Ableton Live and do everything automatically. But there are advantages to doing your own mapping, and it actually still is a paradigm that people love. And you know, it's definitely where MIDI Designer is coming from, is map your own shit. So anyway, just a little bit about what's happening in MIDI Designer. So what's happening in this particular mix, in this particular MIDI Designer, what's happening in this particular MIDI Designer layout is several things, but one of the cool things is panels is somewhat done for the initial instance of them, right? So if I go into design mode here, and you can see this is the image panel, right? So I'm just going to do something. It's always in back, so no matter what happens, that's going to just flip to the back. But I still can't access, I want to access this other panel, but I can't because this stupid image panel keeps coming forward. And if I were to hit the lock here and lock the panels, then they would both be locked. So that's frustrating. So what do I do? How do I handle that? Well, one thing is I'll probably have to provide a solution so it's a lot more obvious. But for right now, I can double tap on the image panel, and even though it's always in back, I can click on Actions and go Send to Back. And that will give me access directly to this panel. And you know, this is the exciting thing here that I've been working on, is these panels, right? So I can take this panel and I can make it smaller, but not by much, right? So here it is going to be constrained by the controls that are on it. And if I want to make it smaller, I have to move the controls off, which is the whole point about movable panels. And that's the exciting thing here, is I can take these panels and I can move them around, and they move with the controls. And for those of you who have never used MIDI Designer, that's probably like, yeah, so. And for those of you who have been using MIDI Designer since 2011, 2012, 2013, 14, you're like, oh, thank God, I've been waiting for this forever. So this is a pretty exciting thing. So being able to move panels, and what does it look like when you move stuff onto and off of panels, and this stuff has all been tweaked extensively. So let's say I grab the pan knob, and now you can see I'm on the panel, move off the panel, and it stops lighting up. So on the panel it lights up, and that means that I'm dropping it on the panel. Off the panel, I'm done, and I'm out. And you know, you've got all these different cases that you need to handle as a programmer. One is, well, what happens if I try to size up this pan knob? And the answer is it's got a limit at the panel right now. So basically, if I take this and I size it up, it's going to hit the panel sides, unless it hits the. I don't think we'll ever hit the knob max. So if it were up here and on here, it's on the panel, and now I size it up, and yeah, it's going to just hit the knob max at the panel. So it actually is size constrained to the panel as long as it's on the panel. So that's pretty much done. Now, you know, the cool thing, and I don't know if anybody actually needs to know about this stuff, but it's, you know, the complications with programming this stuff in MIDI Designer are that you can always show the same page on both sides of your rig. Now, while this makes no sense for most people, it, you know, gives you an amount of flexibility. So if I wanted to, I'm just going to restructure this layout a little bit. So I'm just going to double tap on this page. I'm going to add a new page before it. Okay, so this is a new page. That's cool. And then I'm going to take this second page here, and I'm going to drag it over to the other side. Okay, so now I've got two pages on bank one, and now I'm going to switch the right side so it's also bank one, right? So now I've got bank one, one page here, and bank one the other page here, but I can very well have the exact same page, right? So I can do, you know, all this kind of stuff where I don't have to worry about which page is on which side. I just go where I want to go, and if I'm showing the same page on both sides, that's fine. This adds a layer of complexity for the programming that's pretty big. So if I go into more and I go into design mode and I take this thing and I select it and I move it, okay, they have to move on both sides. Same thing, whoops, let's do that trick again, send this guy back. Same thing if I move one of these guys, he also has to move on both sides, right? So, you know, all this stuff adds a certain layer of complexity. It's nothing, you know, everybody's got lots of complexity in their app and in their program that they're working on. But this is just a particularity of MIDI Designer, that you can actually have the same control in different places without even making, you know, without even doing anything particular. And then in MIDI Designer we allow this other thing, which doesn't work for panels yet, but I'm going to show it again just to remind everybody, is I can take this config control and I can make a copy of it, and you see the background goes red. So now this is actually the exact same control in two different places, right? This actually brings up the config, which is pretty cool because that also gives you the time and the battery life and all that. So if you want a config knob, you can set that up. And then I can take this and I can actually move it someplace else. So now you've got, you know, these sort of crazy relationships where the config knob is in multiple places on multiple pages, and it can also be showing on multiple pages at once in multiple places. So, you know, you've got all this stuff. So actually, I guess the weird case is this one. And just bring it back here. And move this here. So now you should see all four of them light up. Yeah, and there you go. Let's lock the config panel. So now you see all four of them light up. You know, and this is one control. It's just your config control. But if you want to put it more places, how can you? And that's the money with panels, movable panels, is that you're going to be able to copy them. So you're going to be able to say, okay, I want a volume, a cue, you know, a volume, a click track, a pan, etc., etc., and I want it on every single page. So now you'll just be able to take that panel and make a copy, and it shows up in every page. It'll look exactly the same on every page with panels. That's the goal. Even though regular controls do have some flexibility, so they don't have to look exactly the same. So I can actually double tap, I can size this one, and one of them's small and one of them's big, and they're the exact same control. So, you know, that's a little bit about copies and movable panels and where we are in movable panels. So movable panels are working forward. There are some weird cases that I need to hit. I think I've handled most of the cases as far as, you know, having multiple pages showing the exact same thing. I'll have to be careful as I get to copies. That's all going to happen. But as far as stuff moving on and moving off, Oh, I have to make sure that if you delete a control, if you delete a panel and it deletes the controls on the panel, that actually deletes it from the rig. So there's all, data integrity issues, which are second nature to any of you who, I don't know, work at Google. For a lot of programmers, these data integrity issues, you have to be very careful with them. So that's a little bit about where I am on movable panels, and all of this really is moving in the direction where one thing is I'm going to provide some stuff for movable panels so that you can actually make a modular rig. So as soon as you get a channel for the panel and you get a starting CC for the panel, now you're immediately doing totally different stuff with MIDI Designer and designing your layout in a totally different way than you would if you didn't have that. And then, of course, people have been saying, well, I don't want just 2 variables. I want 5 to manage my sysx, right? Because this synth has, this patch that does this, or sorry, this bank of controls that does this, and then this other bank, and they vary by 1 byte or 2 bytes. So now you're going to be able to get, okay, channel, starting CC, and X, Y, and Z, let's say, on a panel. And that will allow you to create your rig in a totally different way and think about your rig in a totally different way. So up until now, we've been using, individual controls has been the only thing. And I haven't ever provided a page channel because a control can appear on multiple pages. So it makes no sense. And so you do have channel changers in MIDI Designer, etc. But what you're going to get now is you're going to get variables for the panel, and then you're going to be able to tie the controls to those variables. So now when you make similar of the panel, or use make similar to get a new panel, it's going to have a particular relationship to the old panel. And hopefully, if this will become a template technology, because you'll be able to say, okay, make similar, and make it, redo it so it's like the thing it copied. So make it similar again to that one, and it'll have its variables, etc. So you're probably going to have to lock out a CC range. Still thinking about this stuff. So that's one thing, and movable panels are great. I'm definitely going to get distracted on this issue for another week or two because I need to do copy and I need to do make similar, and I want to provide this modularity. And that's very exciting. But this is all really to work in one direction, which is pedal boards in MIDI Designer. Pedal boards are by far the biggest feature in MIDI Designer that's going to prove to be useful in the future, which basically has to do with you've got an external piece of hardware, even if it's another iPad, and that controls MIDI Designer, and as you switch pages in MIDI Designer, that hardware maps automatically to the different pages. So this is what's called a heads-up display if you happen to be a fighter plane pilot or a video gamer, and that's the exciting stuff. So one of the huge refactorings that I'm doing is with pedal boards, and the first thing is to do this movable panels thing, and the second thing is there are some problems with the way pedal boards are implemented in MIDI Designer. So one of the first problems that we've had forever is if I go into design mode and I move up, let me actually go to a page so that I can move it. I'm going to lock the panels, that's fine. So I'm just going to lock panels. Let me roll back here. Okay, cool. So just rolled back, did an undo, and I've got panels locked now. So now I can take this page and I could move it up, except it says pedal boards aren't enabled. So let me go back to config and go to pedal boards and enable them in design mode. So now you've got some cool things. Back into design mode, locks are still on. So now I can slide this up and I get to the left pedal board here, right? So now I can put a control on a pedal board, and the way that we've been working is, you have super controls on the pedal board, and those control the sub-control that's on the corresponding page and not its other sub-controls. This is pretty messy. We're going to be moving away from that model, even though that will still work. So we're going to provide other ways to do it, mostly with what we're calling geographic sub-controls. But anyway, the main thing I want to do for now is, okay, you've got this thing on the pedal board page, but let's say that it's at the top of the pedal board page, like up here, and you want to do some work with it. Well, right now that's a huge hassle. You have to kind of roll the page up as far as possible. Sorry, roll the page up, and then it gets stuck here, and that's annoying because now you can't access the page at all. So I've done a little bit of work around this now. So basically, now if I move down and I move down to here, now I can keep moving down, and there is the control again, right? And the other thing that we're doing, which is something a lot of you have asked for, which just makes sense, is if you do not allow pedal boards to be exposed in performance mode, which most of you won't, when you get out of design mode, they'll snap back. So everything just snaps and the pedal board is hidden again. So recap, you saw some of my rig and what I'm doing with QMixes, and that LED colors are useful. Who would have known? You're seeing some image panels on this MIDI Designer layout, so that's what the clouds are from. That's kind of cute. And then I went over movable panels and where that is and where it's moved since last, I think I did the last video on Friday, and now it's pretty close to done. Actually, most of that was finished on Friday night, late, and into Sunday, into Saturday, and then following that. And so, movable panels is moving forward. This stuff is moving forward. There's a lot of other stuff that's happening. 2.4.6 just came out, resolving some of the Wi-Fi issues with iOS 10, but other issues like my buddy Craig Knudsen at Yamaha is reporting that he's having trouble connecting to the Clavinovas over the Wi-Fi network that the Clavinovas present because the iOS devices aren't happy with those Wi-Fi networks. So I've been working with Doug Kroll at RS Touch, which is an awesome app to control Reason, and we've been talking back and forth about all the different connectivity issues over Wi-Fi. For 99% of situations, MIDI Designer users are happy and solved, but Apple changed a lot of stuff, so that's there too. All right, so that's a developer journal. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking it out. If you are interested in what's going on with MIDI Designer, sign up for the newsletter. I'll put a link here. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm putting a lot of pressure on YouTube. I think it's the only social network that's actually doing stuff, except for Twitter and Facebook and maybe Pinterest, and I do Instagram, but it has to be from my phone. And yeah, thanks for hanging out, and thanks for watching the video, and thank you for using MIDI Designer, and thank you for your layouts and questions, and everything's happening around MIDI Designer. It's a really exciting time. Oh, and we're going to see some new stuff on the website. Thanks to Tyler, the web guy, who I will mention in the comments on this video. So that's exciting stuff too. And we're going to be doing some new cool 3D renders with my 3D guy in Argentina, Esteban Tolosa, or as we say in English, Esteban Tolosa. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, and thanks for using MIDI Designer.